Hondas can literally last forever. There's multiple reasons for that we'll dive into. But Hondas also have great performing cars. Many Hondas are very low cost of maintenance and servicing. They're great on fuel. They're sporty looking. You can still get them with a manual transmission in many cases. So there's many reasons to actually buy a Honda Civic. They'll literally last forever. And to add to that, late model Mercedes do not last nearly as long as their older counterparts. And yet I would clearly own the Mercedes over the Honda. And it's not about the three-pointed star or the branding. There's many other reasons for it. I'm going to share the overall quality experience between the Honda Civic as well as the Mercedes in order to shed some light for you guys so you can better understand why I'd make the choice and buy the Mercedes and skip out on the Honda. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. So one key reason why Hondas are so reliable and they'll literally last forever comes down to engine tuning. What we have here is a 4-cylinder engine, naturally aspirated, in other words, no turbos, no supercharging, makes 140 horsepower and about 120 pound-feet of torque. It's also strapped to a 5-speed automatic transmission, driving the output to those front wheels. Over here in the Mercedes, for example, as many German and luxury car brands are doing these days, is we also have a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, but it's turbocharged. In other words, down in there's a turbocharger buried underneath all of this plastic wiring harnesses and other hardware. Now this engine produces 240 horsepower up 100 horsepower over the little Honda Civic engine. And where in a Mercedes they're using a lot of plastic like these parts and pieces, because Germany is strongly mandating recycled plastics and materials, they're using a lot of plastics. Also, hoses and fittings are plastic. They have key rings like that, for example, that are known to split. They get hot, they start cracking through the heating and cooling cycles, and then you have a lot of problems. These hoses are also very, very expensive on any German car. Mercedes no different. That turbocharger spins at many hundreds of thousands of RPM down there, generates a real ball of fire and heat down there that normal exhaust systems don't. What that does is it starts to melt and cause all kinds of heat-cool cycles that cause damage to a lot of plastic and other adjacent parts in the area. Whereas Hondas, for example, do not have that turbocharger. You merely have an exhaust system coming off the back, no turbos, no additional heat. That exhaust is just routed directly outside of the vehicle. You don't have that ball of fire in there wreaking havoc on a lot of the other adjacent parts. So they detune it so it takes less of a toll on all the parts around it. They're not looking for the maximum performance. They're okay in underachieving versus a lot of their competitors. But also when you have a car that's detuned, it takes less strain on other factors. For example, a car with 240 horsepower has a lot of strain on the transmission, whereas on a car with 140 horsepower, there's much less. Picture riding a bicycle. You're in first gear. You pedal really hard and it's very easy to get moving. Then you switch it up to 10th gear and you try to push really hard from a low speed. There's a lot of that strain on the drive, on the chain. Well, the same thing happens here. When you have a high output engine really pushing against that drive, that's creating a little extra strain on the drivetrain. And here the Honda is that weaker lower gear system. And because a Honda is detuned, less power, also the axles that come off the transmission, those bearings in the CVs can actually be slightly downsized as there is less torque against that drive axle. Versus a Mercedes, again, either needs to be beefed up, and if it's not correctly engineered, then on these rear-wheel drive Mercedes like we have right here, you can see extra strain if you're driving the car hard all the time. So other parts can wear as a result of higher output engines. Have you ever seen some of those high output drag cars and they're twisting drive shafts and breaking parts and chassis are twisting? That's because of all that power. Absolutely very exciting, but those are the results of having extra power, and Honda keeps it simple for the sake of reliability and longevity. Another key reason why Hondas are very, very reliable is it all comes down to the pride of craftsmanship. The people working in the factory building and assembling these vehicles actually take a special pride in the vehicles they make. The same thing applies typically for Toyotas and Hondas. Their factories take pride in the reputation of quality. They don't want to have people sitting out there with vehicles that are poorly built. Mercedes, on the other hand, not that the German cars are poorly built per se, but they'd much rather prioritize quality control and the installation techniques secondary to the overall innovation and the performance and the styling bits. That's what the German cars and a lot of the European cars that you'll find actually prioritize. And again, the Hondas prioritize quality parts, quality construction, pride in building, and the engineering is going to be well tested and thought out. So the other reason Hondas last so long, where we're talking about German cars like this, they really do thrive on over-engineering a lot of the parts. Put a relay in a relay and another module on the top of a module, and they really want everything to control itself. Everything's integrated very well and tightly, and it's well engineered and designed, but the problem is there's so much integration and technology that it creates a lot of complexity, harder to troubleshoot, more specific software and diagnostic equipment required, difficult access because a lot of the parts are packaged in such a way that's very, very tight and difficult to get to. For example, as you're looking right here, lots of parts, but they're all buried very, very deep and very difficult to see all the way around. If you had to get to access to any parts that are lower in the engine bay, good luck. You look down there, there's hoses and lines. We got your pulleys, your belts. You have to take apart a pile of equipment before you can even get at your serpentine belt down there. Lots of difficulty in maintaining this. As a matter of fact, many of the German manufacturers actually value the package of the vehicle. They design the vehicle, they want it to look like a certain way, they want the chassis to conform to a certain design. Then the mechanical engineers have to come along later and design this power unit to actually fit within those tight confines. And as you can see, you don't have a lot of extra room to spare. They're actually having to shoehorn this engine in here, and there's a lot more access. This is the 4-cylinder. Imagine going with the upscale engine, the V6, then you're spreading this powertrain even further across that engine bay. Honda, for example, is all about simplicity. Look at how simple this engine bay is. Serpentine belt down there, very easy to access, not difficult at all. Over here, 2 little screws and you can pull a cover. Now you have your 4 spark plugs you can replace. Here, PCV, easy to not just replace, but also easy to service and maintain. You can clean these and that'll actually help give you better fuel economy, better performance. If you get these too dirty, they can actually cause detonation issues and further engine problems. In a Mercedes, that's a much more difficult part to change. Here, very simple. We also have an O2 sensor right here, very easy. Front and center, how difficult is that? Whereas on the Mercedes, that O2 sensor is going to be buried way down underneath there. Good luck in getting at it. You probably have to get at it from underneath. Battery, very easy to pull out with this Honda. Air filter, very easy to get at. Brake booster and the fluid top-ups, very easy. Now you even have your fuse block here, so all your troubleshooting, diagnostics can be done in one spot. And simplicity doesn't just begin and end with the engine. Many would argue that the best drivetrain experience, the best driving experience comes from a rear-wheel drive like you get with this Mercedes. And the Honda, of course, is a front-wheel drive, and there's no disputing that a rear-wheel drive car is more exciting. But from a longevity, simplicity standpoint, nothing's cheaper and easier to package than an engine and a transmission and a transaxle tied into one piece. You have no drive shaft at the back or rear differential to deal with the Honda. Less parts, simpler design. But it doesn't just end with the power units. How about the interior and the electrics? Mercedes first. You've got all these power seat controls, power door locks, all these extra auxiliary controls here. Steering wheel controls all over the place. You've got this beautiful interface right there. That's your infotainment system that Mercedes runs. That's a point of failure. Of course, you have this, very interesting, and that's how you operate your infotainment system. But there's another point of failure, lots of electronics there. You also have a heated steering wheel controls, heated seats, electric park brake, more of an automated climate control dual zone, oversized glass panel on top, and it's that very sunroof that is known to actually come apart and actually become dislodged. That's actually a known issue with the C-Class Mercedes. Honda, on the other hand, keeps things very simple. They've got a small sunroof there, very simple. If it comes off the rails, it's a much smaller opening and easier to deal with. Then we go inside. Sure, we got power locks and windows, but no other seat controls like we have here. This is good old-fashioned pumps and levers to keep that seat fully adjustable, but very easy. Here we have a good old-fashioned handbrake versus the electric brake in the Mercedes. We have no infotainment system here. Just a good old-fashioned CD player, AM, FM radio, makes it very simple. Single stage HVAC controls, and just a lot less technology outside, inside, to go wrong. Very expensive when parts start to break. It's not just the end component. Sometimes it's a relay, it's a module that could cost $2,000, could be a switch that might cost you $300. There's lots of parts that you will find in a Mercedes that can and will break, whereas the Hondas keep it simple. They don't put as much of that technology in the car. The intention is to keep the vehicle running for many, many years. Another reason why Hondas can literally last forever and Mercedes may not, because people just get fed up with paying the big dollars, is the cost of parts. Why? Well, Honda's, again, high quality, low price. I'll give you some examples of some cost differences. Honda, we've got a 16-inch tire. That can cost you $100. Right here, Mercedes, we have an 18-inch tire. That might cost you about $300. Smaller battery from Pep Boys, Canadian Tire, or Costco might only cost you $125, but the Mercedes battery is going to say you have to program it, code it, and buy their specialty battery, and that might cost you $800. Air filter, $25. Air filter on the Mercedes might cost you $150. A set of Bosch cold spark plugs for the Mercedes might cost you about $20 a pop, plus $200 an hour for labor. Whereas these spark plugs in this Honda, because it's non-turbo, can be a standard spark plug, may only cost you $8 a plug and $140 an hour for labor. PCV might only cost you $140, whereas a PCV over on this car might cost you closer to $800. O2 sensor, $100. O2 sensor on the Benz might be more like $300. These simple little cooling hoses on all these Hondas with these constant tension springs are going to be very cheap. They're a basic rubber hose, fit over the fitting, and then just clamp down. But these hoses on a modern day Mercedes or many other luxury cars in the German organizations are much more complex. They're a rubber hose, but they have very expensive plastic ends on them. And these plastic ends are often steel keyed like this, and they're sitting in a very specific direction, but these hoses can cost 3-4 times the price of a standard Honda hose. Now, one thing I believe you'll find surprising is referring to RepairPal, they reference a 2017 Mercedes C300 annual service cost to be averaging around $740 a year, whereas a Honda Civic, a 2013, for example, like this, might cost you a little over $300. So you're approximately twice the cost to own the Mercedes than you are on the Honda. Now you might think, well, it should be way more than that, and it probably would be. Late model Mercedes isn't bad. When you still have warranty, the parts are often engineered to be good for 4, 5, maybe 6 years. That's when it all falls apart. So as time goes on, this Honda Civic maintains lower costs because all you're doing is other parts like water pumps, alternators, brakes, light bulbs, fuel filters. And again, to take note, all those parts are still very, very cheap, and they're cheap when they're new, and they're cheap as you continue on through your ownership experience with the Honda Civic. Now, the Mercedes, they're great for the first 5 years. As I said, it's as things start to wear out. I already said about a lot of those plastic hoses. They start to split and crack with age. Once they start leaking, you can't neglect that. If you run low on coolant, you overheat an all aluminum engine, that engine's toast. You're talking a $15,000 replacement part. Also, we can't forget about turbochargers. As I said already, you can expect to pay over $3,000 to replace a turbo and associated parts. You have other fittings like this. You have an intercooler, of course, other plastic hoses, sensors. There's a lot more going on here. And with time, that starts to add up big dollars. So those are all very compelling reasons why, in fact, a Honda would be your better choice over the Mercedes. But in fact, I want to explain why I would rather own the Mercedes. Right before we do that, I want to give you the quality experience between these two cars. Let's get into it. These are a little overpriced. This is a little simpler. All right, time for a cold start on the Benz. Sounds frisky, let's take a listen. Time for a cold start on the Honda. Well, the Honda sounds pretty smooth as silk as well. Let's take a listen. So then why is it that I say that I would actually choose the Mercedes first over the Honda? Well, primarily because what we're talking about here is a car that looks this great. It's a car that performs this well. 100 horsepower more, it's certainly going to drive a lot better. It's all-wheel drive because this is the 4MATIC version, although it's predominantly a rear-wheel drive biased vehicle. So it's a better driving experience. It has all of the luxury amenities that you could possibly want. Now, there's a caveat to that. The Honda is a great car. If you want to buy a car for somebody that's on a fixed budget, for example, my kids, my parents, those are the people you definitely want to put in a vehicle like this because it's not going to break the bank. Also, if I decided that I was going to keep a car for 10 or 15 years, I probably wouldn't necessarily look at the Mercedes. Maybe 5-6 years, and then if I knew that it was gone after that, absolutely, Mercedes all the way. And that's the way we've selected it. However, if I know in my heart that I'm going to keep that car for 10 years or more, the Honda Civic or any other Honda product is actually the way to go. Because the Mercedes definitely won't last forever, and the Honda likely will. And with all of that said, right there, you're going to love that video. That's why a Toyota Camry will literally last over 300,000 miles, and this Mercedes-Benz won't. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.